Well, welcome everyone. We're thrilled at Disrupt again to have two sensational customers who have agreed to give us some of their time and insight. And you will know some of these players if you've been to previous Disrupts. We're thrilled today to have Chris McMasters and Kyle Edgeworth from the city of Corona in California. And we have Andrew Kizwick and David Feyner from Pittsburgh Mercy. If you were with us last June, you heard both of them talk about how they had to take their organizations basically online almost overnight. In Pittsburgh Mercy's case, helping people who needed healthcare assistance out in the community, trying to take that virtual, and with the city of Corona taking virtually all their operations online. So let's start off with a bit of a recap to what happened back then for those people who weren't here last June. And Corona, maybe we could start with you, please.
Sure. So when the pandemic hit for us, really what happens is the city goes into emergency operation mode. And so as the state started shutting down and life kind of ground to a halt, we activated our emergency operations center. And usually those are activated when we have earthquakes, when we have fires, other natural disasters that occur throughout the city. Everyone gets in a big room. There's lots of screens all around, and we have representation from every department in the city. And in this case, you know, when we walked into that room and everyone was there during a pandemic, we really hadn't planned for that sort of thing. And immediately, you know, as we go through this, usually your police chief and your fire chief are coordinating all the operations throughout the city, you know, as those things go on. In a pandemic, it's a little bit different. And for us, everyone sort of turned to us, and IT became kind of the first responder in that particular situation. And so we had to figure out very quickly how we were going to get people off site, how we were going to continue city operations. And the EOC usually is sort of the apex of all of our operations, and we ended up being able to move that off site. So that was our one and only meeting on site as far as EOC, and the police chief, fire chief, all of the different organizations began meeting virtually after that point. And IGEL became a principal component of us being able to do that. The other part of the EOC is they don't activate often, which is good for most cities. So, but unfortunately, because of that, usually the tech in the room is the oldest tech in the city. So it's all legacy stuff that's sitting around, and as everyone sort of cranks it on at the beginning, it's kind of dusty. And well, so we were able to kind of change that up really quick because of IGEL, and I'll let Kyle explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so part of our, you know, as Chris mentioned, we looked around in this room in the EOC and thought, we can't have this kind of meeting anymore. And, you know, luckily we actually had the tools already in place. We had IGEL, we had Citrix, we had Windows Virtual Desktop, all kind of in the wings, ready to go. And we were able to move it using collaboration tools like Microsoft Teams. We were able to really move those meetings to virtual, and then our workspace, our secure workspace, virtual. And at the same time, we were tasked with the goal of trying to make these departments, like our police department, that normally cannot be virtual, in a virtual environment. And we were able to use those kind of tools to really create that CJIS. In our case, we have to be CJIS compliant. And we were able to take those tools and provide a secure workspace environment for our employees to continue to work.
Amazing. Just the thought of the complexity of bringing a city online is quite something. And you are organized departmentally. Now, Pittsburgh Mercy doesn't have an emergency control, an operations center. Andrew and David are it, I think. And so you had a bit of a different challenge because you've got people out there in the community who by nature are used to being literally face-to-face with the people that they're helping. And all of a sudden face-to-face is not going to happen. So you had quite an experience as well.
That's exactly right, Doug. You know, the nature of our work is very face-to-face. It involves human interaction. Behavioral health and community outreach rely on that moment between two people to find out what's going on and move forward. And immediately that was removed. We had 48 hours essentially to figure out how to take our company, which has been doing this for 40 plus years, and turn it into something completely different, completely pivot the operating model of the company. And that was going to be a challenge. It was several late nights, a long weekend here. We brought in a cot and everything. We're laying on the floor of our data center trying to figure it out. But luckily we had the technology to make that shift. David can tell you a little bit more about that.
So with Pittsburgh Mercy, we utilize various different hardware, but everything that we utilize is IGEL. So whenever we had to make the convert everything to in-office care to community care, like Andrew said, it was able to be done within 48 hours. Pittsburgh Mercy did not have a telecommunication strategy for virtual doctor visits, for how to have meetings virtually. Like to Chris's point, we had a conference room. We stood up our emergency command structure, but they didn't have anything in place to communicate with each other. And with IGEL, we knew we could lean on the technology to deploy a solution rather quickly.
I like the way you used IGEL as a verb, David. That may be the first time I've heard that. It's been, everyone talks about Googling, but now I've heard, something's been IGEL'd. So it's a year later. That's where we were 1 year ago. And the theme of this conference is Unite. And we're talking a lot about what the impact has been on people of the last year, and also the changing role of IT and technology in how people interact inside your organizations and with your customers or your community. So Chris, maybe you can start again with the city of Corona. What's been the people change and the attitudinal change that has happened in the last year as a result of the dramatic changes in technology and how people work?
I don't want to really use the word like unprecedented because it's overused, but it's been a huge change, especially in the government side of things. City halls are closed. Most of your public services where you went up to the counter are closed. The majority of our workforce is working remotely. And that has been in itself a challenge and a cultural shift in government. Government is the 8 to 5 job, at the desk. And all of that has transitioned right into a virtual environment for everyone. And I think what's been interesting to me is like, in the private sector world that I came from, that working at home, that's part of life. I mean, it's you're on the road, you work from wherever you're at. In government, though, it is very, very different. And helping change that culture and push it has been a challenge, but it's also been extremely fulfilling, I think, because you get to watch people who technically, right, they're sort of resistant to change. I think government's sort of known for that, having to innovate and being under that pressure to innovate and wanting to still serve the public. And so as we've transitioned out, you see people starting work earlier. You see people work way into the night trying to get things done, being able to sort of do the same things that they were doing on premise, off premise, right? And giving them access to a lot of government systems that are very secure, right? And being able to still have that type of security and deliver the same amount of service, for the citizens who depend on it. And I think what's interesting too is during, anytime you have a natural disaster or like in this case, a pandemic, people depend on government. They need it to work, and they need it to work when they need it. And so we've been able to deliver services around the clock, to citizens, having call centers for COVID, doing all of these things because of the technology. And so I think that's just been a tremendous change, and we hope that sticks.
Well, and along with that, when we talked to our departments, they were actually looking to us for answers. And normally, when we are pushing projects, it's us pushing those projects for them to change and them to adopt. And really, they were coming to us asking, hey, we need to change. I need to be able to allow our citizens to be able to work remotely or to contact us and get these services and work whenever they want. And so that was really a positive side on our side because of the pandemic. It really forced those adoption of new ideas and technologies.
And just trying to build this government on demand model. I think that's kind of where we're trying to get, at least with our city, is to be able to deliver services when citizens need them at any time of the day, any day of the week. that you need that. So really, really using digital transformation, right, because of a catastrophic, pandemic that's going on, and using that as the catalyst for change right now.
You used the phrase in one of our earlier discussions, government as a service, and this crowd's used to SAS and DAS, but now we got GAS as a new acronym, which I think is great. And one of the positive byproducts you said of that around people is that you've attracted some totally new types of people to come and work for you. So maybe just touch on that if you would.
Yeah, I think one of the repercussions of everything is that when we start opening up this idea that people can work from home, that people can work different hours of the day, that's not typical to government, that we're not sort of forced in sort of geographic boundaries of the city itself. There's a whole new workforce that's out there for us that can now be a part of trying to help and change government. For instance, one of the people that we attracted is a private sector person who did digital marketing, and we brought him in as our chief digital officer, and he's just been a force, as we've been pushing all of this along. And it's a person who would not have normally joined into the government sector, but because he has sort of that flexibility and freedom, he kind of sees what we're doing. I think that's been the other thing. It really opens up the public to understanding that government is trying to change. We're trying to do a lot of cutting edge things, and we're finding that residents and people around us want to be a part of that change. And so it sort of opened the doors to a whole new set of people who can now work for us.
That's great. Well, Pittsburgh Mercy, how about you? Obviously, as we said before, big transition where your people can no longer go and talk to their customers or patients face to face. So what's been the people impact?
So, in a people industry, to piggyback off a point that Kyle just brought up about our users came to us and said, we need to change. We recognize that there's a need that we need to address right now. And we turned around, just to give you a little statistic, I'm checking over here on my dashboard. As of today, we've had 7.45 million minutes of online meetings since this began, which we didn't have before. We had a conference line that got used for maybe a couple hundred minutes a month, but that was as far as it went. Everything was face to face. And when you talk about bringing people together, 164,000 participants, 40,000 plus meetings, nearly 7.5 million minutes of meetings. That's people, right?
That's crazy. And you told me, I think it was David told me, a great example of, just so our audience understands the kind of situations and places that
Sure.
You're out there trying to help people, homeless shelters and church basements and so on, which is not exactly they aren't prime locations for IT. And yet that was what you've been seeing on a daily basis in the last year.
Go ahead.
So Pittsburgh Mercy has 2 homeless shelters in the Pittsburgh area, which are located in the basements of 100-year-old buildings. One of the hardest things with that is getting like a network connection, getting technologies to work. And with having IGEL, IGEL endpoints, we were able to leverage, again, their technology. So we were able to provide them with access to Citrix. We were able to manage our devices on cellular connections. There was a lot of problems that we've had over the years, and none of those problems exist anymore.
And what was the people impact of that? You told me examples of healthcare workers and doctors being able to go out and do what they do because of the technology being able to connect them.
Yeah, so regarding the technology, we have our homeless shelters are a bit unique. We open them in the winter when it gets cold to allow people to come in. Obviously, that looks a lot different. That feels a lot different in the midst of a pandemic. And we rely a lot on volunteer and outside assistance to help us, connect these persons that need service to the services that they need, like healthcare, whether that be a visit with a specialist or any sort of medical doctor. We bring those persons in from the outside, those medical doctors, and they need ways to connect back to their own health systems. And sometimes they're not an employee of ours. They work for another company. We were able to leverage IGEL to actually allow them to connect to their Citrix environment to the organization they actually work for, just as seamlessly as they could connect to our own environment. So we actually have a couple of machines at our women's shelter that connect to two largest healthcare providers here in Pittsburgh, as well as our own environment. And the provider who's standing right there at the machine has the opportunity to select any of those environments to go log into, do whatever they need to do, prescribe some medications, check a medical history, anything like that. And that was never a possibility before. It was always disconnected. And now we can bring that, we can unite all of that, for lack of a better term.
And what I'm hearing in that, and I also heard from Chris and Kyle, was that you've seen a new sense of cooperation. You know, sometimes people rally when things get bad. I think that's actually a human characteristic. Sometimes the better side of humanity comes out when terrible things happen. And well, let's pop back to Corona, but just talk about how you've seen the attitudinal change and how you've seen people come together. And they've only been able to do that because of the technology as the platform, but the human side of people realizing we're all in this together. We have to solve this together. None of us can do it alone. So you saw a lot of that in different ways in Corona, right, Chris and Kyle?
Yeah, I think cities are big operations, obviously. You know, for us, we support 160,000 people, and everything from, you know, the water, you know, that runs, and your electricity to, you know, public safety support services. And so there's 22 departments. All of them have the unique attitudes and unique goals in mind, and it's very, very siloed. And so I think if anything, yeah, the COVID really just made everyone sort of, you know, come together in a lot of ways. And on the IT side of things, you know, we've become sort of the gel that connects everything together, for, you know, if there's a better term. But I just think that there's people have sort of responded in a way to come together to help citizens. And it doesn't matter sort of what you do, everyone's trying to figure out how they can help. And that's really changed the dynamic of the city for the better. And then the technology, I mean, again, it just has brought everyone together. I mean, kind of like both Andrew and David have said, it's, you know, the amount of meetings that we have online, the amount of collaboration that's occurring across departments that you see happening within these virtual environments is just extraordinary. And what we're able to produce and provide, you know, has completely changed. And so, so even though, you know, like I think IT has always been a great back office operation, that has completely sort of changed and been able to transform and bring all of these services together for the city.
We share the story of the fire chief, if you would.
Oh yeah, so it's sort of an off subject, but you know, I think for me, I was on a meeting and you know, the fire chief had just kind of reached out to me afterwards and just said, "Hey, how are you doing?" And it was just one of those, you know, in a business environment, we don't always ask that really human part of us, you know, doesn't get into the professional part of our lives. And I think that's been, again, one of the significant changes that we've seen is just the people, I think, because we're devoid a lot of that water cooler talk and being able to get together as human beings, people are reaching out in different ways to connect. And for me, like, yeah, the chief asked me, so you have a chief who's over, you know, 150 firefighters, right? Reaching out and saying, "How are you doing today? Is your life going okay? You staying safe? You're healthy and good?" And it just made my day. And I think we're seeing a lot more of that. There's a little bit more patience with IT and all the things that we're trying to do to help everyone be efficient. And at the same time, we're seeing people reach out and just being more human to one another.
That's heartening to hear. And Pittsburgh Mercy, you guys have seen a lot of that, I hear, as well.
We have. One of the more interesting things that we've seen with these cross-departmental connections that are being formed because ease of access through, you know, online communication has been opened is that, and this is sort of a new and interesting concept for us, we have dozens of different departments, small programs, maybe just a few staff. We have large programs with hundreds of staff. And one of the things that we've been noticing is that um, we're creating better and more holistic care for our clients, because these units who are traditionally separated are caring for the same pool of clients in some cases, but they don't coordinate the care planning. At least they haven't traditionally, and nothing has really sort of forced their hand or given them the opportunity to do that. And I'm starting to see more, as I review our medical record, I start to see more little connections here and there, left and right, between two different departments to make sure they don't overlap care, that they can sort of force multiply their care. And that's definitely been an interesting effect of opening these channels of communication, allowing the people to sort of integrate and wrap care around the clients we serve.
It's again heartening to hear that it's interesting. A lot of us on the outside wonder why can't healthcare be more integrated, or why can't government services be more integrated? And again, as a result of this, maybe the most important thing, I always argue that the human transformation is way more difficult to make happen than digital transformation. No, maybe because IGEL makes digital transformation so easy. I shouldn't have said that. Good commercial. But the truth is, people have a hard time changing. And I think it's very, very encouraging that despite the trigger for it, which was something bad happening, you're telling us about more cooperation, about more caring for other people. And at the root of that is technology, which makes it easy. So maybe talk about that for just a minute. I don't want you to do an IGEL commercial here, but truly, if it weren't easy and it weren't secure and stable, this kind of human environment wouldn't be possible. So maybe you could both just touch on that for a moment, how that's enabled you to do your jobs better.
So I think for us, I mean, IGEL's been kind of the force multiplier, being able to do it, securely all the way through from endpoint, to where we're delivering, it's sort of foundational for us to do our jobs. Being able to take police officers who maybe they're at risk for one reason or another and be able to send them home and work, securely still from home, has been, a foundational change for us that couldn't have occurred without that type of technology. Being able to, like I said, to deliver an EOC virtually, across an organization. Again, from city council meetings right to the smaller meetings that occur. I mean, all of these things are occurring online. All of these things are occurring virtually. All of these things are occurring, secured because of that technology that underlies the whole thing. And I think for us, we talked about this earlier, which is, when the pandemic hit, everything got bought out. We couldn't buy laptops. We couldn't buy anything because the bigger entities, the states, the counties, and everyone, they basically purchased everything up. And we were good because we had, a envelope full of UD pockets. We had a bunch of IGEL units, right? And so when people came to us, that deployment was fast. It was just plug it in, turn it on, and boot it up, and it's done. And that occurred throughout the city. When we sent people home, it was the same thing. You have people obviously who don't have the technology at home. So being able to give them, a UD pocket or some other piece of technology and send them home, right, and let them use that was a game changer for us.
Piggybacking on that, I mean, IGEL really gave us that flexibility to spin up and be agile, and with that workforce that was able to be, secure and working remote. I can't think of another operating system where I can walk into a room. In this case, when we talked about emergency operations center, where there's 30 plus computers that are 5 years old, that haven't been online for months. They need tons of patching. They're outdated, and they're at their end of life. And then bring them a new life with a better user experience, more secure, in under 5 minutes. I mean, you can't do that in a normal environment. And we were able to do that because of security, or because of IGEL, and that gave us that capability to really allow our workforce to continue to work wherever they needed to be.
Well, thanks. I didn't do well in my don't make it an IGEL commercial, but sometimes it goes that way, doesn't it? Andrew and David, what do you have to say about that?
I think it's sort of hard for us to separate ourselves from being IGEL fanboys and turning this into a commercial, because IGEL provided us the leverage to take what is a really small department. I mean, there's only I mean, you're looking at half of our team, right? And that's kind of difficult and challenging when you've got 1,200 people in 70 different locations, some of which are roaming around, the county and providing services anywhere. So it's difficult for us to operate, and we needed something simple and easy to manage. David always uses this term, and I hate it so much because I'm not an IT person by trade. He calls it the single pane of glass. With the UMS server, you can manage everything remotely from like one screen. And I'll be honest with you, again, I'm not an IT person by trade. I came from our behavioral health side, and even I can do it, right? I just right click and push out the device, and it's literally that simple. And the reality of things is that we didn't make the move to IGEL because we wanted to be cutting edge. We made the move to IGEL because it was a necessity. Like, we needed something to allow us to multiply our efforts, and we just couldn't handle it on our own. Enter stage right, IGEL. And the ability to manage all these sites, this old church, 100-year-old church, the basement of the old church where you can't get a signal through, and good luck trying to get the pastor of the church to let you hammer drill through the wall to put a fiber connection to the building or something like that. It's different, and it allows us to do that force multiplication.
So like Andrew's saying, we have low staff numbers, and we have about 1,500 employees we manage. We also have 1,000 endpoints that we just hit that number. But it's with IGEL, it's ease of use. Like, behavioral health services are usually, from a technology standpoint, 10 years in the past for healthcare. And with IGEL, it allowed us to innovate and provide services like you would for a physical healthcare setting. So virtual doctor visits, collaborative care, things like that we before were not able to do.
And now you were. So powerful stories. And again, it's hard not to get a commercial, but I think the bottom line message of this is that you need the technology to be easy to use and almost invisible under there, especially if you've got users who aren't trained IT professionals. So if they can't make it work, you got a problem. It could be the greatest technology in the world, but if it's difficult to implement, difficult to use, it's not going to get used, as we all know. Let me ask you just each one closing question. Again, around the concept of unite, what's been the biggest thing you've personally learned out of the last 12 months experience? What's been your big aha or your big refreshing wow? And Chris, you want to go first?
Sure. I think that we've taken so much for granted, before. And when we were all able to sort of be in a room together, and all the conversations you have, and sitting in your in someone else's office and just shooting the breeze for a few minutes, right? All of the human interaction, when that's taken away from you, when it's a privilege to have it now, I think it heightens your awareness of how special that is, and it makes us eager to get back together. So I think for me, at least, through the pandemic, that's been the one thing that's kind of stuck. And I know that when I go back into the office, I'll cherish those things.
That's a good lesson for all of the IT professionals who like to think that, I'll send it to you electronically. I don't actually want to be face-to-face with you. And I'm sure in our audience today, there's a lot of people who actually think, I'd love to be talking to someone face-to-face again. Who wants to go next with that?
I think there's a better sense of community, and we're all in this together. And I think people have more patience with each other because no one knows what's coming next, and people don't take things for granted.
And jumping on what David said there, I completely agree. I think for us, it's been that, people are more patient with us. They understand that there's challenges, but they're willing to work through those challenges. Whereas before the pandemic, it would have been, hey, why isn't this working? And they only get mad at IT when something's not working. Or in this case, they understand that we're all trying new things. We're trying to make it a better environment, and they're willing to be patient with us as we work through those challenges.
And have you seen a little bit more, wow, how did you make that happen towards IT, as opposed to what's wrong with you people? Why can't you fix this?
Absolutely. I think what they've come to understand is IT is that lever that they can pull to really make a change. And before, they just thought of us as that back end function. And now we're truly showing our what our value is to our companies or to our citizens.
And I can add to that. So I have an executive meeting every week, with all of the department heads. And I would say for the first 3 months of the pandemic, we have a little exercise that we call shout outs. And so everyone sort of gives a shout out if someone's done something great or some department's done something great for them. And I swear to you, the first 3 months, it was completely IT shout outs, right, from all the executives for 3 months straight. So we got our credit.
That's great. The heck with the fire chief who's saving people's homes, or police who are saving lives. Let's say thank you to IT. All right.
Yeah.
I like what Kyle has to say about, the previous treatment of IT was, we don't care about you until something's broken, then you're the worst people ever, right? Because you broke this, you took it away from us. And it's that there's been a certain amount of resilience among our staff, and this realization that they have to rely, on technology to do their work now. And the ability for a therapist who's been used to doing one-on-one therapy visits in the same office for the last 25 years, that changed overnight. And their resilience to stick through that and work together as teams to make sure that gets done. And, I know some people are out of the office completely. David and I are not. We wanted to stick through it together. The team is still here. David's on the wall behind me. You can hear me knocking on his wall. And we've stuck it out together, and just that camaraderie and that sense of purpose together has made it tolerable. Let's put it that way. As much as I can tolerate David, that is.
Yes. Well, that's why last year you were together in the same room, and now I notice you've given him his own office.
Yeah, he's big time in it.
Yeah, there you go. Well, on behalf of everyone at Disrupt Unite and all of us at IGEL, the entire ecosystem, thank you again, Chris, Kyle, Andrew, and David, for being loyal customers, for sharing your time so generously once again, and for sharing your insights. I think the human repercussions that we heard from you on what has happened in the last year are all incredibly positive. And I hope they're viewed as positive by all the people in the audience who are mostly IT professionals. And I hope that you've had similar experiences where you've been given an increased amount of respect by the people who depend on your services. And as everyone here said, IT is no longer a back office service. We're sitting at the table and they're asking us not only what do we think and what should we do, but how are you? How are your kids today? So thank you all for sharing your time so generously, and we'll see you all at the next Disrupt. Have a great year.